Hey, what's up guys? Welcome to the channel. We have some breaking news. ESPN is reporting the main event of a UFC Fight Night on April 22nd will be Sergei Pavlovich versus Curtis Blaydes, and this is going to be my reaction and early prediction. And when I started thinking about this fight, as soon as I saw that it was announced, I have some hot takes in regards to my early predictions, so we'll talk about that a little bit later in the video. But this is a massive fight in the heavyweight division. This is a fight we all saw coming. I thought maybe, it'd be announced for March, but ultimately it's going to happen on April 22nd. They don't know a location, but it will be the main event. Obviously, it should be the main event. You have number 3 ranked Sergei Pavlovich versus number 4 ranked Curtis Blaydes. And this should be for the number 1 contender spot. We'll talk about that in a second. It should be, but it may not end up being. But this is a quality fight. The heavyweight division has been one of the worst men's division in all the UFC for many, many years. And I've talked about it for a long time. Once you get out of that top 5, it kind of falls off a cliff. But this is a quality fight of 2 top heavyweights who are on win streaks, who both have elite level skill sets. And this was the fight to make. I mean, you have Curtis Blaydes on a 3-fight win streak. His last win was against Tom Aspinall in July of 2022. This was an unfortunate ending because Tom Aspinall got injured in the first 20 seconds of the fight, so it was a little bit inconclusive. And so it was like, okay, well, where does this really put Curtis Blaydes? Because a lot of people are questioning the legitimacy of this win. And then the fight before that, a TKO win over Chris Daukaus. The fight before that, a unanimous decision win over Jairzinho Rozenstruik, where he outgrappled him. But nonetheless, he is on a 3-fight win streak, which is hard to string together in the heavyweight division. And then you have Sergei Pavlovich, who's on a 5-fight win streak, and not just a 5-fight win streak. He's on a 5-fight first-round TKO or KO win streak. His last 5 fights, he has won them all by first-round KO. We all remember in December, he KO'd Tai Tuivasa in the first round. The fight before that, he KO'd Derek Lewis. A lot of people said it was an early stoppage. Derek Lewis went face down. It should have been stopped. The ref made the right call. And that kind of surged him up in the rankings. And now, he's towards the top of the heavyweight division. And now he's taking on a massive test, what I believe to be the biggest test in his career, even though he's ranked higher than Curtis Blaydes. I think this is Pavlovich's hardest fight in his UFC career, and I'm very curious to see how this plays out because this is your typical striker versus grappler matchup. Sergei Pavlovich wants to come out and box, and the reason I say box and not kickbox is because Pavlovich is incredibly one-dimensional and throws very little kicks. When I watched most of his UFC fights, when I did my last prediction video for his fight against Tai Tuivasa, I did not see one single kick. And I know they've all ended relatively early, but he wants to come out there, strike, he wants to stuff the takedowns, and he wants to knock you out. For Curtis Blaydes, he's very well-rounded, but he likes to come out, wrestle guys, take you down, beat you up, and finish you on the ground. And that's what he's going to try to do in this fight. This is your typical striker versus grappler matchup. And this is a massive fight because you have Pavlovich who's ranked number 3. You have Curtis Blaydes who's ranked number 4. They're both on win streaks in the heavyweight division. And the heavyweight division is now kind of wide open because Francis Ngannou left the UFC and he left the heavyweight title vacant. And I don't think there's a fighter on the UFC roster who is happier about Francis Ngannou leaving the UFC than Curtis Blaydes. Because Curtis Blaydes, he has 3 losses in his pro MMA career. 2 of those losses are to Francis Ngannou. So as long as Francis Ngannou was the champion of the heavyweight division, Curtis Blaydes was most likely not getting a title shot. And now it kind of leaves the division wide open. You have Jon Jones versus Ciryl Gane for the vacant heavyweight title going down in a little over a week at UFC 285. That's a massive fight. And then after they fight each other, it's kind of up in the air what's going to happen next. And I believe the winner of Sergei Pavlovich versus Curtis Blaydes on April 22nd should deem the number 1 contender in the heavyweight division because it just makes the perfect sense. I mean, there's nobody else that you should be giving a title shot to right now other than the winner of this fight. There is one other option, though, but I do not believe that he deserves a title shot. You have Stipe Miocic, a former heavyweight champion, whose last fight was against Francis Ngannou at UFC 260 all the way back at the end of March of 2021. He got brutally KO'd in the second round, and he's been out working for the fire department since then, answering the phones at the fire department. And he's been sitting on the sidelines. He is arguably the greatest UFC heavyweight of all time, But at the same time, you can't sit out for over 2 years. And by the time you would fight, it would be roughly 2.5 years because you wouldn't fight till the end of this year. I do not believe that Stipe Miocic deserves a title shot. But if Jon Jones does win, if Ciryl Gane does win, I think they're looking at the division and they're saying, what is the biggest fight I can take now? And the answer to that question is probably former heavyweight champion Stipe Miocic. But Stipe Miocic does not deserve it. Every time he loses his belt, because he's lost it twice now, he sits out and claims he deserves an immediate rematch. Now, I did agree with him. When he got KO'd by Daniel Cormier back at UFC 226 in 2018, I thought he deserved a rematch. And they did the whole Brock Lesnar, horse shit after the fight. And then it ultimately didn't end up happening. And then they had Daniel Cormier fight Derek Lewis later that year on short notice because they needed a pay-per-view main event. And Stipe Miocic just sat out and then eventually got the rematch with Daniel Cormier, beat him, then did the trilogy, beat him again, and then lost to Francis Ngannou. But I don't believe, he got KO'd in his first title defense or second title defense since gaining the belt back. And the fight wasn't particularly competitive against Francis Ngannou at UFC 260. And I don't believe we should reward these guys for sitting out for 2 or 3 years just to get a title shot. And it doesn't matter that you're a former champion. You should have to go out there and fight. Because if Stipe Miocic comes back and fights the winner of Jon Jones versus Ciryl Gane, what are we doing? What are we truly doing? Because what's going to end up happening there is even if Stipe wins, he's still going to be inactive. I heard people complaining, Francis Ngannou only fights once a year, blah, blah, blah. The only time that was his fault was when he tore his knee out. Okay? Before that, there was multiple times he was begging for fights. The UFC was refusing to give him fights. So there was 1 year that Francis Ngannou was responsible for that. But you look back at Stipe Miocic's career, 1 fight in 2021, 1 fight in 2020, 1 fight in 2019, 2 fights in 2018. So Stipe Miocic historically, and some of those were for legitimate reasons too. I'm not saying that they weren't. But historically, Stipe Miocic fights once a year. He is 40 years old. Every time he loses the belt, he's like, I'm taking my old belt and I'm going home and I'm going to cry about it until I get an immediate rematch. Doesn't ever want to at least fight one time to earn a rematch for the heavyweight title. And I don't think we should reward that type of behavior. You should make Stipe Miocic versus somebody else, maybe Tom Aspinall. Tom Aspinall is going to need a fight in his return. I don't know if the UFC is going to want to do that considering he's coming back off an injury. But make Stipe Miocic fight someone to earn that title shot. The winner of Curtis Blaydes versus Sergei Pavlovich should be the #1 contender. And we should see, the winner of Ciryl Gane versus Jon Jones at UFC 285 take on the winner of Curtis Blaydes versus Sergei Pavlovich. And it's a fight where they're going to be both on the same timeline. So they're not too far apart. You have UFC 285 taking place in early March. You have, the Curtis Blaydes versus Sergei Pavlovich fight taking place in mid to late April. So they're within about a month of each other, month and a half of each other. So it'll be perfect for the end of the year. You have those two winner of those 2 fights match up with each other at the end of the year and fight for the heavyweight title. Meanwhile, you can have Stipe Miocic fight someone else. If he wins that fight, he can fight the winner of that matchup that I just talked about in early 2024 or mid 2024. Knowing Stipe Miocic, if he fights again, he's going to want to sit out for another year and a half answering the phones at the fire department. But I think that's what should happen. Now, in terms of an early prediction for this fight, I think this is a tough fight to pick because we have seen Curtis Blaydes KO'd before. All 3 of his losses are via KO. He got KO'd by Derek Lewis, and he got KO'd by Francis Ngannou twice. Okay? And Sergei Pavlovich is a KO monster. 17 pro MMA wins, 14 by KO. Then you have Curtis Blaydes, and this fight's definitely going to end in a finish. You have Curtis Blaydes, 17 wins, 12 by KO. So both of these guys primarily win by KO. And Curtis Blaydes, I know we talk about him as a wrestler, but he is a very well-rounded fighter. He's a monster heavyweight. I'm pretty sure he cuts down to get to heavyweight. And he has nasty power, and his striking has been ever improving. Even if you look back at that Derek Lewis loss, he was looking very good striking-wise until he got caught with that uppercut and brutally slept. But Curtis Blaydes' chin is a little suspicious. But in the heavyweight division, anybody can be KO'd with one shot. And Pavlovich has unbelievable power. You know, he brutally finished Tai Tuivasa. He brutally finished Derek Lewis. He brutally finished Shamil Abdurakhimov. So this is one of those fights where someone's getting KO'd. I believe 100% there's no way this fight is going to decision. Either Sergei Pavlovich or Curtis Blaydes is getting KO'd. So I was like, who am I going to pick in this fight? Because I can really see Curtis Blaydes going out there and out-grappling Sergei Pavlovich, but I can really see Sergei Pavlovich going out there and KOing Curtis Blaydes stiff because of his nasty KO power. But I am going to go with Curtis Blaydes via first or second round TKO ground and pound. Now, when we get closer to the fight, I'll do a full breakdown and prediction. I may change my mind. I may not. But make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss that. But I was looking at their resumes, and I have to admit, Sergei Pavlovich's resume is straight up garbage, okay? His last 2 wins are his best wins in his UFC career. Tai Tuivasa. I know people love Tai, and this is where the hot take comes involved. I know people love Tai Tuivasa. Tai Tuivasa is not good, okay? He almost got brutally KO'd by Greg Hardy, okay? Greg Hardy got overzealous and got KO'd by Tai Tuivasa. Tai Tuivasa was never good. He just has some decent speed. He has some decent power. You know, I'm not saying he's the worst fighter ever. He's better than, you know, a majority of the heavyweights, but the heavyweight division is so lowly skilled and relies on power. Derek Lewis, not good either. Derek Lewis and Tai Tuivasa are interchangeable. Neither one of them has really good technique. Neither one of them is particularly great anywhere. They just have nuclear power in their hands. And for me, Sergei Pavlovich, I just think, you know, he is a perfect matchup to brutally finish both Tai Tuivasa and Derek Lewis, because not only does he have that nasty power, he also has very good technical ability on the feet. But I can't get out of my mind when picking this fight, because initially in my mind when I heard this fight was announced, I was like, I'm picking Pavlovich by KO. But then I started to think about it, and I cannot get that Alistair Overeem TKO loss by Sergei Pavlovich out of my head. Alistair Overeem dominated him on the ground. And I know Alistair Overeem was very good on the ground, and I know this fight was all the way back in 2018, damn near 5 years ago. But Curtis Blaydes is an elite level wrestler, and Curtis Blaydes is a massive heavyweight, and Pavlovich is so one-dimensional, and the resume is just straight up garbage. I have to go with Curtis Blaydes. I think he'll be able to out-grapple him, and I think once he gets Pavlovich down, I think it's over. I think Curtis Blaydes is going to be able to have his way with him. I think Pavlovich is a guy that just trains heavily on takedown defense because he knows his striking is so good, and I think if Curtis Blaydes, with his strength, with his wrestling ability, goes out there and takes Pavlovich down, I think he's going to be able to brutally finish him via ground and pound, similar to what Alistair Overeem did. I hope I'm wrong. I hope Pavlovich has improved vastly in the wrestling. I think, you know, for a Curtis Blaydes fight coming up, I think he should be training heavily in the wrestling, the takedown defense, and the jiu-jitsu, and the get-up game. But I just feel like Curtis Blaydes, he's so good once he gets you down. He gets you down, he beats you up, and he looks for the finish. And Curtis Blaydes' 3 losses, the only 3 losses of his career, and I already mentioned it in this video, I believe, earlier. Derek Lewis, a fight he was winning, got clipped with an uppercut. What are you going to do? Derek Lewis has nuclear power. The other 2 losses, Francis Ngannou, who just left the UFC as the undisputed UFC heavyweight champion and has ungodly nuclear power as well. So you take that into account. I know the Tom Aspinall win isn't that great just because Tom Aspinall got injured early. But I think he has a much better resume. You know, he's beaten up Jairzinho Rozenstruik. He's beaten up Alexander Volkov, who at that point in time had evolved a bit. He wasn't the Alexander Volkov of old. You have Junior Dos Santos. Okay, Junior Dos Santos was kind of falling off a cliff at that point in time, but still. And it's not the craziest resume ever. You know, he has a win over Alistair Overeem when Alistair Overeem was deflated and off, you know, the horse meat or shark meat or whatever you want to call it. A win over Mark Hunt. I think Curtis Blaydes has the more solid resume. I think he has the significantly better skill set. And I just think if he gets Sergei Pavlovich down, it's not going to be a good night for Sergei Pavlovich. But I could also see a scenario where Pavlovich is able to stuff the takedowns. And if he is able to stuff the takedowns and get comfortable in the feet, I think Curtis Blaydes' striking has evolved. And I think Curtis Blaydes, a lot of people are worried about the takedown. And the next thing you know, you're getting KO'd by Curtis Blaydes. Junior Dos Santos found out the hard way. But I do think Pavlovich, if he can keep it standing, and he's not so hyper-focused, worried about the takedown, I think he can KO Curtis Blaydes, but ultimately I think the grappling of Curtis Blaydes is going to be too much. I think he will get Sergei Pavlovich down and either KO or TKO him via ground and pound. And I hope if Pavlovich wins this fight, if Blaydes wins this fight, whoever wins this fight, I hope they fight the winner of Jon Jones versus Ciryl Gane, because I think that is a massive fight. I would love to see any of those matchups. Take all 4 of those fighters and mix and match it around. I love all those matchups. So let me know what you guys think down in the comments. Do you think Stipe Miocic should be able to fight the winner of Jon Jones versus Ciryl Gane? That's what I really want to know your opinion on. Let me know down in the comments. Don't forget to like the video, and thank you so much for watching.